The anniversary is once again sparking painful memories for those caught in the middle of those riots. Among them, hundreds of Capitol and Washington, D.C. police officers, and one of them, D.C. police officer Michael Fanone, almost died. And he sat down with my colleague Katrina Perry.
This day 3 years ago, you were very badly injured. You suffered a heart attack, a brain injury. How are you now?
I mean, I would give myself a clean bill of health. Unfortunately, I feel like the same cannot be said for the state of our country.
Expand a little on that.
I mean, unfortunately, Donald Trump, who ultimately is responsible for the insurrection at the Capitol, which occurred on January 6th, is still a viable candidate for office this coming November, and continues to peddle the same lies, the same violent rhetoric that inspired so many Americans to attack the Capitol, to attack law enforcement officers, and threaten the lives of members of Congress and their staff.
Now, you nearly died that day yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened insofar as you remember it?
Yeah, so I was a 20-year veteran of the Metropolitan Police Department. And on January 6th, I was assigned to a special mission unit. I spent the vast majority of my career working in units like this, focused on violent crime and narcotics trafficking. But on January 6th, I heard the distress calls coming from the Capitol, from my fellow officers, and I chose to put on a uniform, something I had not done in many years. And along with my partner, Jimmy Albright, we responded to the Capitol to try to assist those officers in repelling the attack that was taking place. I made my way to what's known as the Lower West Terrace Tunnel. This tunnel is significant in that on Inauguration Day, the president-elect will walk the tunnel onto the inaugural stage to take the oath of office. But on January 6th, it was the scene of some of the most significant violence perpetrated against police officers that day. There were about 40 officers, including myself, who were defending the tunnel against thousands of violent rioters. During that struggle, I was pulled from the police line by one of those rioters. I was stripped of my police badge and radio. I was beaten, struck numerous times with a taser device. And as a result, I suffered a heart attack and a traumatic brain injury.
Do you think with the passage of time that some Americans have forgotten the severity of what happened that day, that the intensity, the meaning of what happened has somehow faded?
I do. You know, Americans, unfortunately, you know, with events like this, specifically surrounding politics, I believe have a short attention span. You know, this is something that's become an uncomfortable topic of conversation, not just between individual Americans, but within the media.
Why do you think that is?
I think there was a thought process in the aftermath of January 6th, specifically within, you know, the Biden administration, that, you know, if we simply model good behavior, people will behave well. I understand that thought process, but as a law enforcement officer, I ascribe to a different way of thinking, and that's accountability. I believe that Americans who committed crimes, specifically on January 6th, should be held accountable. They should be prosecuted. If they're found guilty, they should be sentenced and serve their time.
Very many of them have.
Yes, but we also have a situation where, you know, the orchestrators of the insurrection have yet to be held accountable. We see the process beginning, whether it's, you know, the criminal prosecutions of Donald Trump and his supporters, and, you know, states have now taken up the debate as to whether or not Donald Trump is qualified to be on the electoral ballot. I think those are all well and good. The fight to preserve democracy in this country needs to be an all-hands-on-deck effort. Every American needs to take this seriously. But we need stronger leadership from the president. The president sets the tone in this country. The president is responsible for explaining to Americans the threat that is posed by MAGA and by the former president.
You did vote for Donald Trump. You believed in him at one point. What is your message to him now? What can he do?
It's not really up to Donald Trump. I mean, obviously, he could walk away from the presidency, but that's not enough. He needs to be held accountable. He committed crimes. There's, tons of evidence. If you paid attention to the January 6th Select Committee's investigation, the criminal charges brought by Jack Smith in the Department of Justice, Donald Trump needs to be held accountable, both criminally and politically.
Donald Trump, of course, we have to say, maintains his innocence through all of this. The events of January 6th those protests on that day came from a belief from a lot of people that the election had been somehow stolen, of course, buoyed up by the remarks that Donald Trump was making, and he refused to accept the outcome of that election. Given we're still a long way from Election Day, but it would look at this point like it's going to be a rematch between Biden and Trump, notwithstanding what may happen between now and November. Are you concerned that something similar may happen towards the end of this year? Should Donald Trump lose again? Should he refuse to accept the outcome of the election? I'm
not concerned, and I'll tell you why. It's because I'm convinced that something is going to happen. In fact, I think that even that statement is disingenuous in that we have seen a continuation of politically inspired violence in the aftermath of January 6th. I mean, obviously nothing to the same scale that we all witnessed at the Capitol that day, but we've seen attacks perpetrated against law enforcement, against the FBI, threats made to elected officials, threats made to judges. Really, anybody that opposes MAGA and the former president draws his ire, and he knows that simply mentioning them leads to his followers attacking them, threatening them. These I wouldn't even call them dog whistles anymore. These are overt threats. He knows exactly what he's doing.
So what can be done? Do you have hope for the future?
I don't know if I would call it hope. I feel as though the Department of Justice, other institutions that are charged with protecting our democracy are doing their job within the confines of their authority. But ultimately, it's every American's responsibility to preserve democracy and ensure that it exists for future generations in this country. I think that's, in a way, we've all become complacent to our own success. We haven't seen our democracy challenged in this way in a very long time. We certainly haven't seen that threat come from within. So I think it's important that every American, especially our newer voters, those who may not have been old enough at the time of the January 6th attack to fully appreciate what took place. And again, I turn to the president, Joe Biden, to set the tone and to help educate those Americans as to what's really at stake here.
Former Washington, D.C. police officer Michael Fanone, thanks for joining us.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me.